Present.
Melton present.
Hall present.
Foster present.
Chang present.
I'll move on to oral communication. Any members of the public wishing to share their thoughts this evening? Looks like the answer is no, at least for now. Approval of the minutes. Any comments?
Staff has a quick correction to make. Thank you very much, Commissioner Melton. Under action for the minutes, item 2, it should read, and it does read, Vice Chair Foster moved the staff recommendation and Commissioner Chang seconded the motion, and then we failed to say what the vote was. So we, for the record, add the sentence, the motion carried unanimously 6-0 with Chair Cook absent.
Well, we all noticed that, but we were just not saying anything. Thank you for that correction. Any other comments, edits? Move. To approve? Move to approve. And Commissioner Aguilar looks like he's going to second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. Anyone wish to comment on the agenda? Any agenda revisions? Okay. Reports from Commissioner meetings and events. Okay. Director of Utilities report.
I have a few quick things on the communications front. You're aware that PG&E has been doing a fair amount of work on their pipelines running through the city of Palo Alto. November was a very big month for finishing up major projects, including the above-ground survey of their 3 transmission pipelines for PG&E to remove any vegetation or structures that are in the way. As far as we know, there was minimal need to have landscape or buildings altered. Also completed by PG&E was the pipeline upgrade and pig launching station off East Bayshore that allows them to camera the big transmission lines. Final landscape restoration is being negotiated with the planning department. A smaller project to raise PG&E electric towers near the golf course has also been completed. We are currently running something we call the Keep Calm campaign. We've been getting a good response to our series of program outreach pieces using variations on the Keep Calm and Carry On theme. We set 5 examples at your places addressing our residential rebate, solar, safety, and low-income programs, plus our commercial rebate program. We have additional ones in various stages of production addressing our special programs for Eichler owners, our Call Before You Dig message, and our Avoid Clogging Sewers message. On the My Utilities online customer account, we did a survey and we're in the process of upgrading and improving our online services. We wanted feedback on what features would be most valuable to our customers. To that end, we just sent an online survey to our 3,700 current My Utilities account users. We've gotten back over 1,100 responses already. We have not yet analyzed the responses, but we're delighted by the phenomenal response rate that we've gotten thus far. We will have good data to help us prioritize tasks on this project. For workshops, we have a demonstration garden, which Utilities coordinate a free hands-on planting workshop for community members, groups, and environmental organizations. As part of the educational outreach for water efficient and sustainable landscaping, volunteers replanted a major section of the City Hall King Plaza with native low water use plants and efficient irrigation. The workshop was intended to be an educational event with value to the community as a demonstration of the city's commitment to environmental sustainability. As we do every year, we've got an LED bulb exchange, and we're also, you probably noticed if you came in through the front, which I imagine you all had to come in through the front, that there is the Aurora tree out front. The Utilities Department launched the LED lighting rebate program on November 16th, this year, in front of City Hall with the launch of Aurora, an interactive LED sculpture by Charles Gatican. Palo Alto residents can purchase up to 3 Switch brand LED bulbs at either 40 watts or 60 watt equivalencies at a reduced cost at 3 different retail stores: Ace Hardware, Piazza Fine Foods, and Fry's Electronics. And tonight's Wednesday, so on Monday night, at its meeting earlier this week, Council endorsed the city's participation in a competition put on by Georgetown University which is designed to spur energy efficiency gains in local government and residential buildings in small to medium-sized communities. The Public Works Department and the Utilities Departments are working together on the application. Energy efficiency gains for the period from August 2014 to August 2016 will be compared to the prior 2-year base period. The winning community is eligible for a $5 million prize sponsored by the Department of Energy. Really? Okay. I thought it was Georgetown University itself, but it's the Department of Energy. Okay. The criteria for evaluation are to spur innovative approaches for communities to decrease per capita energy use, to highlight best practices for communities to create and implement inventive plans for sustained energy efficiency, and to educate the public and engage students in energy efficiency issues, including methods, benefits, and environmental costs of the full fuel cycle. And then my last update, we have a Residential Customer Connect pilot. We're in the process of activating the web portal and engagement tools for about, I did help test that and I flunked, for about 300 customers who enrolled in the Advanced Meter Pilot Program. Next week, the first 110 customers will be provided access to the web portal to view their electricity, natural gas, and water use on an hourly basis on the day after the usage occurs. The remaining 190 customers of the 300 total are expected to receive the service early next year. We plan a more comprehensive update for you on the progress of smart grid pilot projects and other technologies next year in the spring. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Yep, Commissioner Melton.
You, early in the report, you commented on the survey that you're doing with the online billing. I don't know that I've ever seen any statistics on what percentage of our customers are using e-bill as opposed to paper bill and e-pay as opposed to other forms of payment. Do you happen to know?
I'm going to turn around and look. Actually, Debbie, do you know?
That's what I'm trying to remember.
Was it a third of our customers?
I feel like that's right.
I think it's about a third, but we can actually provide the statistic to you later. We actually do track it. I just don't have it in my head.
Because there's two things. How many people use the My Utilities account portal and look at their history and that kind of thing? And then a smaller percentage of them pay their bill online as well.
Okay, so for the viewing community, what our utilities communications manager just said is there are two subsets of customers. There are the larger set of customers who use our online billing system and actually look at their account and usage and check things regularly. And then there's a subset of those customers, may not even be a subset of those customers, but there's a smaller set of customers who actually do online bill payments or e-payments. So we can provide those stats to you.
Thank you.
The marketing campaigns that you referred to, the Keep Calm and Call Before You Dig and all those, are we developing those ourselves, or is there some national organization that develops those that we buy them from?
Well, so we
They're
do.
wonderful.
So actually, you'll need to come up to the microphone if you want to. But we do take advantage of some of the information that might be available from some of the national organizations. But we also develop our own, and we actually have some professional firm that helps us with some of the graphics.
Yeah, that's what I was going to clarify. We get the ideas, and then we get help with the actual design. But I think one of the things that we're trying to do is focus on making things simpler and more fun and more engaging. A lot of these messages just are not captivating messages, even though they're important. And I think there's been a tendency in the past to feel that because they were important, if you just say it, people will pay attention to it. But that's not true. You've got to say it in a way, people have a lot of information coming at them, and so we're looking for kind of more fun and interesting ways to say these important things.
I think the programs are terrific. I think they're helpful in a substantive way, and I think they're also just, quirky and fun in a way that really helps to build a sense of community and helps to humanize utilities. They're so wonderful that I had assumed that I just wasn't sure if we were developing them in-house or if they were part of a national marketing organization that made them available to utilities nationwide. It's interesting to wonder if other utilities might want to take advantage of some of the products that we've created.
I think they will, actually, and we've got a real lot of creative folks and a lot of synergy. Somebody gets an idea and somebody else gets, one advantage of the fact that we all have cubicles rather than closed-door offices is ideas can bounce around more easily. But both places like the American Public Power Association and the American Public Gas Association have websites and things where you can upload examples of things you've done that other people can then take advantage of, and we are doing that.
Very charming.
Any other comments or questions? And I assume there is no unfinished business. In that case, we'll move on to our first action item, which is the staff recommendation regarding the Palo Alto Green Gas Program.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I noticed that the on-air sign is not on. Are we at least being recorded?
I don't know. Yeah, normally that on-air sign should be on.
I mean, I know you keep those recordings as a record of the meeting.
Yes, we find them to be very helpful when our notes are less than thorough.
Okay, well, let's, I suppose, carry on in the meantime, I think.
We will have...
Oh my gosh, check that out. Let there be light.
So Senior Resource Planner Carla Daly will give you an overview of what our proposal is.
Thank you. Good evening. I have a very short presentation. Just as a little bit of background, everyone I'm sure is aware that the Palo Alto Green program has been a very successful program here at the city with approximately 20% participation rate, and our corporate citizens have enjoyed the recognition that they've been able to receive by participating in that program as well. In March 2013, the approval of the carbon neutral plan reduced the need for Palo Alto Green and really opened the door to introduce a new program, Palo Alto Green Gas. What we are proposing, what staff is proposing, is a Palo Alto Green Gas program to be implemented by July 1st, 2014. It is very much modeled after the Palo Alto Green program, including voluntary participation with the ability to opt in or out at any time, a simple single green offering for each customer class that allows customers to green up 100% of their gas usage, and block purchases available to commercial and municipal customers. We are proposing to supply the program with carbon offsets, and offsets come in many shapes and sizes. The first kind of layer that needs to be decided upon when purchasing an offset is what registry the offset is certified by, and there are multiple choices. I've listed most of them here. The Climate Action Reserve is the most popular registry for voluntary programs across the country. CARB also is a registry, and for offsets that are used for AB 32 compliance, those have to be certified by CARB. A few others, the American Carbon Registry, Verified Carbon Standard, Gold Standard, and the Clean Development Mechanism are all offset registries. Within each of those registries, there are multiple protocols, including forestry, livestock, landfill, coal mine methane capture, urban forestry, ozone depleting substance, getting rid of those, I'm having trouble coming up with a word for that, and rice cultivation is another protocol out there. Just as a quick comparison, because there's so many different attributes for an offset, the prices also vary among those, the most expensive being a CARB guaranteed offset. And what guaranteed means is that if CARB has certified a certain offset or protocol and then goes back on that at a later date. Some offset suppliers will guarantee that offset, and that they will replace it with a CARB certified offset if something goes wrong with what you've already purchased. So those run about $11 to $12 a ton. CARB non-guaranteed is around $9 to $10 a ton. A carbon or a car, livestock, or forestry offset runs in the range of $7 to $9, and car landfill is in the $1 to $5 range. And there's a lot of very cheap offsets out there too, in the $1 to $2 range. Staff is recommending that the Palo Alto Green Gas Program is supplied by CAR certified offsets, and like I said, CAR is the most common registry used for voluntary programs across the country. We are not recommending buying the CARB offsets because this is a voluntary program. We're not using these offsets to meet a regulatory compliance under AB 32, and so there's no, we don't feel like it's justified to spend the extra money on those offsets. Forestry, urban forestry, and livestock are the protocols that we're considering. They seem the most tangible and palatable for a program like this, and we intend to give a preference to California projects if possible. As far as how the costs break down, the offset cost is about 4.8 cents a therm. That is derived by 1 therm is equal to about 0.0053 tons of CO2, and using a $9 per ton car, livestock, or forestry offset price as an estimate. We're assuming the program administration cost will be around 3 cents per therm. We are about to put an RFP out on the street for this service, so we don't know that cost for sure yet, but that's what we're assuming. And we are planning to start the program much like Palo Alto Green was started, with a turnkey contract, someone to do all of the marketing and supply the offsets. In the case of Palo Alto Green, it was renewable energy credits, but same concept. And then as we put enabling agreements together to go out and buy the offsets ourselves, we'll pull that back out of the contract and just use the consultant for the marketing and purchase the offsets ourselves. So the total estimated cost is 8 cents per therm. And looking at a couple of scenarios for bill impacts, just focusing on a median winter residential gas use, that comes out to be a little over $4 a month additional cost on a typical bill of $60, or a 7.8% increase. So our recommendation is that the UAC recommend that City Council adopt a resolution which establishes the voluntary Palo Alto Green Gas Program, and to approve the 3 new associated rate schedules that were in your packet. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I certainly have a number of comments and questions, but let's go around the table, or the dais. Commissioner Eglash?
I think it's a terrific program. I think it's simple and straightforward. I commend you on putting together something that's simple and straightforward. I just have one minor question. Do you anticipate a need to educate the customers, the ratepayers, on what a credit is and what it means? And do you anticipate having to deal with customers that worry that credits aren't real, that the tree would have been planted anyway? And can you share with us, I realize you're going to hire an outside firm for the marketing, so this is perhaps an unfair question, but maybe you can just share some of your own thoughts on that component of the communications aspect of the project.
Right, and I mean, that's definitely a concern and something we've talked about a lot, and you're right, I'm not an expert on that part of the program. It's not really what I do. I look to people like Debbie Katz to help with that sort of thing. Definitely, choosing a registry that's relatively well known. If you go to the TerraPass website, they talk about CAR, choosing protocols that are a little less obscure. I mean, the ozone depleting is it feels a little out there, so we tried to go with the attributes that would be hopefully easiest to explain, not to say that any of it will be easy to explain. you didn't really ask this question, but we did consider actual biogas to try and supply this program, which maybe would have been a little easier to explain, but it just didn't mesh with the long-term commitment and price of that in this program. So we really do feel like offsets are the best way, and we will have some communication challenges that we'll need to overcome. But we did use renewable energy credits for Palo Alto Green, so we've kind of gone through a little bit of this process before, not exactly the same product, but similar.
Thank you.
I have a question about how are offsets generated? In other words, we have a way of buying them, and obviously in various categories. So let's take forestry as an example. So how are the offsets that we and others, including airlines and everybody else, buys these things, but who generates them and how are they priced? And I'd like to understand a little bit about the other end of the transaction.
Well, they're generated by the project being a real project that the certifying agency verifies as an actual project that's doing what it says it's doing. So either somebody's planting trees if it's a forestry project, or planting trees in an urban environment if it's an urban forestry project, capturing landfill gas if it's a landfill project. And so once the registry has certified that that's a real project and that there are actual offsets being generated by it, then it's just it's a tradable commodity at that point.
Okay, I think I get that. So one of the things that was in our packet as an information report was a report from Palo Alto's urban forestry operation, and the city now has an urban forester, and they're ginning up a real program that they hope to carry forward. So could Palo Alto have a program in the urban forestry department for urban forestry that could be qualified and generate offsets, and we could buy offsets from our own other department?
It's certainly possible. Shiva, going to talk about that?
Yes, there is discussion going on. That's a potential possibility, but it's a longer-term project, not immediate for this particular need.
I know it's not for July of 14, but maybe down the road. Okay.
And our urban forester is well qualified on many of these topics too, so he's aware.
I just wanted to understand if that's the way it works. So okay, I got it. I agree with Steve. I think this is a terrific way to handle the green gas. It's exactly the same way. It exactly follows the model of the electric side, and I think our customers will understand it relatively easily because it's just all we've done is change it. It's the same program, different commodity, and that's pretty straightforward.
I commend you on a simple and straightforward and appealing program. I think it's going to be very successful and follow well on the heels of the electric program. I just had two really basic questions. One is, do you know if the pricing of these credits is relatively stable? And by that, let me just elaborate. For example, if you publish rates, as are in the attachment to this handout, of 8 cents a therm, it's difficult to just change the rates on the customers all the time if it's 8 cents 1 month and 12 cents another month to cover costs, it's impractical to keep changing the rates. So can you buy forward for an entire year at a time at a fairly stable price?
Yeah, we can do a couple of things. We can buy forward, or we can actually even kind of buy backward once we know what it is we're dealing with as far as demand for this program. So it's not like electricity that has to be delivered
Right.
instantaneously. So I think we can do some creative things with that. The prices don't seem to be wildly varying. That said, over time, they could certainly change as demand for offsets or the supply for offsets changes. And so there's certainly the potential that we'd have to take a look at that 8-cent number down the road. But I don't think it's oh my goodness, this month they're crazy expensive, we need to change the rate. That's not the scenario that we see.
Okay. And the other one is more of a legal question. I noticed the implementation, the schedule is for July 1, 2014. And I'm thinking that that's probably allows enough time to satisfy Prop 218 requirements, because there has to be sufficient time for customers to...
I don't believe there are any 218 requirements for gas.
I see. Is it only for electric?
No, it's only for the fee-based services, water and wastewater.
Okay.
For us.
Okay. So could it be...
Yeah, and it would be for trash, but we don't bring that to you. So for electric, gas, and fiber are not subject to Prop 218.
Mm-hmm. So could it be implemented earlier than July 1? Without rushing it, I mean, could it be comfortably done, or is there enough? You need enough time to communicate it out, set up the program, get the contractor on board to manage it. So it needs that amount of time.
There's a couple of things. Probably one of the more significant ones is the billing system and being able to make the changes to that necessary for the program. That's probably the biggest bottleneck.
Okay. And just as a final comment, I also had this idea that Commissioner Melton did, and that is I really think there'd be a lot of appeal amongst the residents if they knew that some of the credits they were buying were locally beneficial in terms of the urban forest. I know you said you are looking at it. I just think it's really appealing for a local sale point.
So I agree with my colleagues that this, what you've put forward, I think is a really simple proposal here, and I think it's out of the options that we've discussed along the way in the past several months, I think a good way to transition the Palo Green brand name. But I do think that it is a different product, as you said, for the gas side than the electric program. And I do think the concept of offsets is a bit of a different sell and different concept for people than renewable energy. I think offsets are a little bit more amorphous, I guess, and in my mind, I think I think folks have heard of them, can sort of get the concept, but I think they are a little bit harder to grasp. Maybe this is just me personally, but I think it's harder to get excited about offsets than thinking about renewable energy. So I'm curious. I saw that the projections that you have are the same participation rates as for the electric program. My sense is that might be a little bit optimistic. I'm curious if you have a sense of the adoption rates for the other types of utilities, either gas or electric, who have used these kinds of offsets and programs.
I do not have those numbers.
So, we're a little unusual in the fact that we're a gas utility. There's only PG&E. They don't have a program like this, to the best of my knowledge. They're SoCal Gas. I don't think they have a voluntary gas program either. So we will be a bit on the leading edge, certainly here in California. And, our projection is just a projection. The commensurate with the number of customers that sign up, we'll have a proportional amount of money, and that's what we're going to be purchasing in terms of the program.
So the other programs then that you've listed on page 4 to 5 of the memo that we have here, so those programs we don't have information on in terms of participation rates?
Yeah, I don't have those. Sorry.
I'd be interested to know. Just to get a sense of really, what type of participation.
So we should point
rates
out that for, I don't know what their offset programs produce, and you're right. We had a very successful electric program, probably because renewables is an easier concept to grasp. And I don't know if their programs were competing with ours, but if they were, we did much better than they did. So, point of comparison.
Okay. And I guess the other thought that I would throw out is that I know that your recommendation is to use the car offsets. The other thought that I would throw out is, you know, I know it's not a regulatory system, it's voluntary for us here with the Palo Green, and the carb offsets are a little bit more expensive, but I'd throw out the idea of just perhaps thinking about using those carb offsets just because of the different situation that they are in. They are within a regulated system. They're the only set of offsets, or the system of offsets that is vetted by a state government that actually plays within a regulatory system. I think it could, if we used carb offsets, could have the really way of basically raising the bar for the rest of California, because you would be retiring offsets that would otherwise be used for compliance purposes under an enforceable limit for the state. And I think there's some more guarantees there in terms of the actual reductions that you'll get under a regulated system, and it would up the ante for other entities in California that are subject to regulation. They would have to find other ways to reduce emissions. They won't have as many offsets to use. So just throwing that out there as an idea, it's an opportunity for Palo Alto to be a real leader and set a precedent in that way. And finally, I'd be interested to hear my colleagues' thoughts on that point. But finally, I do agree with my colleagues' comments about sort of that local touch, if we can make that at all possible, either within our own urban forestry program, or at least for marketing purposes and for people to be able to grasp it a little bit better, finding projects that are as close to Palo Alto as possible, to make those reductions feel as real as possible.
Can staff respond?
Sure.
I would imagine that doing the local option is not, certainly at this point, CARB certified. So, we sort of have to decide what route we're going to take. I don't know if the CARB market is as robust as some of the other offset markets, so that could be a bit of an issue. I would wonder if you could support moving forward, at least with the way we've proposed it, and then every year, like we do with every program, we come back and we either tweak it or make changes, or perhaps by then we have some local options. So we would be re-presenting that to you anyway, along with the results. But this is one way to get up and running pretty quickly, to the extent our billing system, we can work through those hurdles. The 3 letters that are associated with our billing system, they're SAP. And so we do have some challenges, certainly with that one.
Sure. And I understand on the local front, that to get anything locally certified and going through any system will take some time, but I do think there's some merit to thinking about having as local as possible of the the whatever offset projects we do use. I think that is something that we can strive for.
Did you respond to the CARB versus CAR issue, though? You're advocating for CARB. That's not a billing system issue. You're saying
it might just be a market. I don't know if that market is as robust. It's a newer market.
So is there a approach we could take that would do what Commissioner Chang is suggesting, but provide the flexibility that you may want, to suggest that CARB certified offsets would be preferred, but CAR certified and the others you suggest would be acceptable to the extent that the CARB market is not sufficiently robust?
I would wonder if we'd either end up over-collecting. The prices are different, right, between the markets? And so it sort of does beg the question, if we assume it's CARB, but we can't get it all, would we have over-collected? There are issues there with respect to how we look at the monies that we have to collect from our customers to support this program. And we kind of have to learn a little bit first, just as CARB is doing right now. They're clearly in the throes of their learning. Anyway, let us know what you all think.
Commissioner Chang, what would your thoughts be if it was said that the program would start as stated on the offset, but with an explicit request, statement, reminder, something that after 1 year, we take a look we don't forget that issue and come back and look at CARB. That,
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be amenable to that. I mean, I'm curious then, it sounded like there's a little bit of uncertainty as to, I don't know if you've looked into how available, offsets are in the CARB market. I mean, that seems like something
Right.
pretty fundamental that we should understand, at least.
CARB is still working through approving protocols. They're not quite there yet.
But they do have protocols for some, the
They do have a
specific
couple.
areas that you're suggesting
they
in
do.
forestry and livestock.
They do. I mean, certainly they're more expensive. We know that. So the 8-cent number would have to change if we were definitely going to prefer CARB.
And it's a
certified.
voluntary program, so I mean, we're not looking at strict, rate impacts, bill impacts that are across the board. So it's a voluntary program, and I mean, I do think just thinking about that, perhaps can give a little bit more certainty to the actual reductions that might occur, because it would be within a regulated system that's can be said to be held to a higher standard, perhaps.
And so another angle at looking at all of this is how do you, what hurdles do you, try to minimize so that customers will actually sign up for this sort of thing and get used to having this program? Because we do have an educational challenge in front of us. And so, we were pretty thoughtful. I mean, I guess you could charge them a lot more. I'd say that might eliminate some customers right there who might otherwise sign up. I don't know. They'd look at the bigger bill impact and say, not that interested anymore. I mean, sure, it's CARB certified, but we'd have done it at, $1, and now it's like $2 or whatever it might be. So, I mean, I guess it's something to consider.
Commissioner Chang, articulate, if you would, exactly the benefit you see to CARB certified offsets.
So I think it may help in terms of, I mean, as you said, there's an educational component to all of this. I think it may help in terms of having customers feeling a little bit more, one, that we're pushing the envelope and leading in Palo Alto a little bit more, but then also a little bit more certainty that the offsets that they're purchasing are real and will actually result in greenhouse gas reductions.
Where will CARB certified offsets be located? Back to our local, will they be in California by definition, or they could be anywhere in the world?
I haven't been following the regulations as closely, so I think that's a question for staff.
The question is, CARB certified offsets will be located where? Is there any requirement they're in California, or could they be anywhere in the world? Or who knows?
Yeah, I don't think there's a restriction that they have to be in California.
So I think we should try and I see the appeal of what you're saying, and my recommendation would be to try and maybe walk a middle path here and maybe include in your memo to the City Council on this a little bit more commentary on that issue of that somehow picks up Commissioner Chang's preference, which I certainly would agree with, for CARB certified, if we could, but perhaps saying that at this early stage, you don't, if you feel the CARB certified, either the additional expense, the not lack of robustness of the market leads you to conclude that's not the right way to go now, but that we'll re-examine at some point.
We will take a look at that.
Anything else? Okay, I have a number of comments and questions and suggestions. First of all, I think the program is excellent, and thank you for your work on it. With respect to the education angle, actually, let me back up with a question first. The Palo Alto Electric Green program, the traditional one, what was the incremental cost to the average customer per month? Anyone know that or remember that off the top of their head? $10. $10. $10. And this program is less, right? This program, if I'm reading my chart correctly, to the median customer, it costs $1.44 in the summer and $4.32 in the winter, right? So it's substantially less. So I strongly feel this should not be an opt-in program, it should be an opt-out. That is to say, we did not terminate Palo Alto Green, we suspended it. And I think it should come back to life. If necessary, this program should be called Palo Alto Green, not Palo Alto Green Gas. And it should It looks like I'm about to get some feedback from council on this. And customers should be told the program is starting back up. Good news, it's half the price of the old program. If anyone, that's changed from electric to gas, and if anyone doesn't want to, they can just send in their notice and opt out. So council, go ahead and provide comments on that.
I hate to jump in here, but what the problem that presents, I think, is if we structure it the way that you've suggested as more of an opt-out rather than an opt-in, then we sort of lose the voluntary element of the program that is embedded in the...
Wait, let me just clarify.
Okay.
Not opt-out for all customers, opt-out for those who had signed up previously for Palo Alto Green.
And I think it's a little stickier. I mean, that's a little closer to the line, but I think we still are then imposing a fee on customers that haven't voluntarily agreed to that particular fee.
So I would disagree with that, because these customers have voluntarily agreed to a higher fee.
Mm-hmm.
We have suspended the program, and now we are resuming the program with a slightly different, not a different goal, a different approach and a lower cost. So I would...
So here's the little struggle I also have, just so you know. I don't think all electric customers are gas customers and vice versa. That makes it a little sticky.
I know that some electric customers are not gas customers. You think we have gas customers who
We
are
do
not
not have the
electric
same number of electric customers as we have of gas customers, just
Okay.
bluntly.
I trust you.
We don't, there's different numbers.
Right.
I just have another point to make, Jane Ratchie, Assistant Director. The Palo Alto Green Electric program is suspended, and it will likely come back, or we plan that it might come back, perhaps as a donation program for local solar. And we were thinking that that program would be an opt-out, that those people would continue to be in the Palo Alto Green Electric program. Of course, we'd communicate with them and tell them, we've changed the program, it was suspended. Now we have this new Palo Alto Green Electric program. Here's the concept. Do you want to remain on it? Or if you don't want to remain on it,
Let us
opt
know.
out. This, to me, is a very new program. It's a different program, and we were not thinking that it would be an opt-out, because we don't have any Palo Alto Green gas customers right now.
Right. So when I understand the thinking on that, I'm delighted to hear you're continuing to work on a Palo Alto Green Electric resumption program, or whatever you want to call it, and that it could be an opt-out. I would say, to me, the kind of thing you described for Palo Alto Electric Green, or whatever we want to call it, although it's electricity, it actually is fairly different, most likely, than what Palo Alto Green has been in the past. Whereas I would actually say Palo Alto Green Gas is very similar to what Palo Alto Green has been, other than the fact it's for gas and it's offsets, not RECs. But I think to the average customer, it will appear very, very similar. The objective is the same, the costs are the same, the approach is basically the same. We're doing offsets, not RECs, but I think to the average person, that's a small difference. So I would give some significant thought to making it opt-out. If other commissioners want to chime in on that, I may be a minority of one, or maybe not, but I'd be interested in thoughts. Let me continue my comments, and then folks can circle back on that point along with others. Let's see, next one. On the issue of local offsets, I certainly am supportive, generally speaking, of buying local and so on and so forth, and local programs in general. So I'm in favor of local offsets, California offsets, and so on and so forth. Having said that, I have heard that offsets, you get a much bigger bang for your buck by purchasing offsets in tropical locations, basically planting a tree in a tropical location versus in somewhere in the middle of Canada. Just the more temperate, whatever those tropical zones, gives you a far better return on your investment. And so I would think that the memo mentioned, and I think we all feel this way, that in general people like the idea of local, and I agree with that. But I think people in Palo Alto are also internationally minded, and if it's clear that there's a significantly better impact from internationally based offsets, I think that should be considered, and I think I wouldn't rule that out. And maybe there's an opportunity to do a mix, some local, some non-local. And I would think the key criteria would be the biggest bang for the buck, in other words, the biggest climate impact per dollar spent factoring in some degree of assurance that you're actually getting what you purchase. Jane, you're looking puzzled. Do you want to?
The dollar we spend, those dollars, those are an offset. You can think of it as a ton.
Okay, so you're saying we spend $1, we get
a ton.
a ton. And you're saying whether you do it, that's interesting.
And so
you're saying
some
that
project
a ton of offsets here and a ton of offsets there cost the same? That seems almost hard to believe. In other words, let's
Well,
say,
it's a market, and so they're going to get some price, but maybe the cost of the offsets, or maybe a project will produce more tons of greenhouse gas emission reduction if it's in a certain location versus another one. That means they're going to produce more offsets, more tons, and so they can sell more offsets from that project. But we will buy per ton, not per project.
I'm looking at my fellow commissioners for help here.
The
I don't
idea is
understand
a tree in the tropics might remove more tons of carbon than a
Right.
tree in Canada, but you're not buying trees. You're buying tons of carbon removed from the atmosphere.
Okay, so help me out here, folks. I'm being a little dense, so that's okay. So I plant a tree in the tropics, and it costs me 10 cents to do so, and it removes lots of carbon. I plant a tree in Palo Alto, it costs me $1 to plant that tree, and it removes less carbon.
So you have fewer tons to sell from the tree in Palo Alto than you do from the tree in the tropics.
Okay, and we're buying tons, I see. So my tree in the tropics gives me more, but somehow then I should be willing to sell my tons from the tree in the tropics for less.
So indeed, if you were in the business of creating credits, you might find it more profitable to plant trees in the
Because my cost
tropics
is
than to
lower.
plant trees in Palo Alto.
Was there a single market clearing price or anything?
Right,
for
because
the offset? I don't think-
the
I don't
market
think
clearing
there's-
price is dollars per ton.
Well, but unless someone goes out and says, I have a preference for offsets in California, in which case you can charge a premium for offsets from California. Something's wacky here.
Right. I mean, it's no different from our renewables, right? Purchasing. Now, we have a preference for California-based renewables, so we might pay a little bit more for that. But at the end of the day, we're buying a kilowatt hour of
Right.
renewable energy.
Well, that's right. And of course, if in the tropics we put up those renewable energy projects, we can't even get the power here, so it's sort of a moot point. But if we're talking about offsets, it doesn't really matter whether the offset really fundamentally is here or halfway around the world. An offset's an offset.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you on that point.
Right.
I'm simply saying, yeah, you can have a preference for a location and dictate that preference when you're out there doing your purchasing.
Okay, let's do the following. I won't take up people's time on this further. I may follow up with you guys offline on this one and take up more of your time without wasting everyone else's time. I will just say one other thing. An intriguing thought is Palo Alto has various sister cities around the world. It would be sort of intriguing to think if there's any possibility of offset programs in any
Okay,
places
now
around
you've
the
made this program that we thought we could do simply very complicated.
That's my job, to think of creative ideas for you. I will say that Commissioner Waldfogel, I believe, had raised the point of fracking in all of this, and just to add more complication to things, and whether there's an opportunity to certify somehow that people who participate in this program are getting gas from non-frack sources and so on and so forth. Do you have any comments on that based on your correspondence with Commissioner Waldfogel? Speaking of complication.
Well, firstly, this is an offset program, not a physical gas program. So staff is not proposing to supply this program with actual gas. Setting that fact aside, there's no product available at this time that is a non-fracked gas product. It doesn't exist. First of all, pretty much every molecule of gas that's produced in the world is fracked in one way or another, using horizontal drilling or traditional drilling techniques. Fracking has been going on for 50 years, so pretty much all gas is produced by some form of fracking. But it's not possible to buy that product at this point. There's no non-fracked gas available on the market.
Commissioner Hall? I'm going to ask for feedback from all of you on the opt-in, opt-out question. So
Can I add one last thing, though?
Yes.
I mean, if someone truly wanted to buy non-fracked gas, it would be biogas. I mean, that is a way to buy non-fracked gas.
Okay. I have more questions on you for that, but I'll take that offline as well. Commissioner Hall.
On the opt-out, I have a sense that since I'm a gas customer too, I've not been part of the Palo to Green, so I'm not a good data point, but if I were, I think I would prefer to make a fresh decision, just as one data point. That's just one data point on that. I just had a comment for Deborah. It's almost tongue-in-cheek here. I think that this discussions, I've learned a lot from the discussion, my colleagues' questions and so on, and I think in the beginning when we thought this explaining of what these credits really are, it sounded like very simple. I actually think that the work, you have your work cut out for you, because I think a lot of the potential customers who want to sign up for this are going to have these same kinds of questions, and I think it's important to have some kind of a tangible explanation of what these things are, including some of the thoughts that kind of we bounced around here.
Out of curiosity, how long did it take to ramp up the Palo Alto Green program? How many years?
What do you mean?
From the day the Palo Alto Green program, Palo Alto Green reached a roughly steady state of 20% participation.
Electric program. How long did it take? It's been around for 10 years. It probably took about 5 years for us to really start having a significant percentage of the customers.
Love it if my fellow commissioners would weigh in on their thoughts on opt-in, opt-out.
Well, I'd like to bring the issue to a head. I move the staff recommendation as written.
I second.
So I guess I'm trying to remember our protocol here. So this is my time to make an amendment or an alternate motion. An alternate motion, which may not be successful, but that's all right. I'll move the staff motion as written with a change to an opt-out approach. And again, just to clarify, opt-out only for people who are currently Palo Alto Green customers, not all customers, just to clarify. That is my motion. Hearing no second, it sounds like my motion is not going anywhere. So now we return to the previous motion. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I guess there would be one suggested amendment as to reflecting my previous comments, is just to, however you brilliantly phrased it, but to add some consideration of the CARB offsets, at least down the road, and perhaps after some additional investigation by staff too, as to how robust that market is.
So if I can respond to the intention of the friendly amendment, my opinion is it's unneeded. Staff has told us that they're going to consider it, and we don't need to put it in our motion that we vote on. I trust staff to consider it and incorporate it in what they bring to finance in whatever way they think they ought to in their judgment, which might include nothing at all. So if it's important to you that something's there, then I think your amendment's important. But my position is we've had the discussion and that's adequate and we don't need to modify the amendment.
So I think that is a rejection of your friendly amendment. And if I'm not the... Oh, that's right. It was Commissioner Melton. Sorry, that's right. It's Commissioner Melton, right?
Yeah, I don't accept the amendment. I think that as Commissioner Eglash said, I think that if the CARB market develops more substantially and staff a year from now, or when they give us their first annual report on how this program is doing, says, okay, we think we want to step it up to the CARB market, or something has changed that the CARB market is more appealing. Right now, I don't see there's a big advantage to the CARB market. I think, though I think there could be in the future, and I'm sure staff will advise us if that happens.
Regardless, staff will certainly incorporate a bit more discussion on the CARB market, and when we go to the Finance Committee, I guess as Debbie Lloyd, our Utilities Compliance Manager, pointed out to me earlier, there's offsets, and there's no real ceiling on the number of offsets there are, so we will do a bit more research on that regardless and incorporate it going forward into the Finance Committee recommendation.
So just a clarifying question.
So you don't need the...
When you said there's no ceiling for offsets.
Motion. Oh, do you want to address this, Debbie? So our Utilities Compliance Manager, who's also our legislative and regulatory person, will address it.
So for the cap and trade market, the allowances are capped. That's the cap. The offset market has been designed to allow the entities that have a compliance obligation to have some alternate. And there's a cap that every individual entity can use offsets instead of allowances. But I don't think there's any cap on the actual offset market. Therefore, if we increase the demand in the market can respond with more supply. So it's not necessarily going to reduce the amount that's available for those entities that have the compliance market. So that's one of the things that we'd think about, are we making an actual difference for the additional cost of those offsets?
Well, I'm fine with staff's assurances that you're looking into a little bit further. I didn't get a strong sense that I think it was a suspicion that the market with CARB offsets may not be as robust. I didn't get the firm sense that you've actually looked into that fully. So it would be great if you could look into that a little bit further. I mean, the cap and trade system is operational now within California. That's run by ARB. So
I think the point Debbie was making, though, was you don't really influence that market, even by buying anything in that market.
Okay, so point taken on that. I think my point was just that I think even with the system that's put in place, it is a regulated market. It's the only offset market that you've listed, or our system that you've listed, that has been vetted by a state government. There may be some additional assurances that customers have by going with a state-regulated system versus some of the other voluntary offset systems.
Okay. In that case, unless there's any other further comment or amendments, which it doesn't sound like there is, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. On to our next topic, which is the resolution approving City of Palo Alto Utilities legislative policy guidelines for 2014.
So we have Utilities Compliance Manager and Legislative Regulatory Manager, Debbie Lloyd, here to give you an overview of the guidelines. And just as a reminder, she did work closely with our Senior Resource Planner, Nico Prokos, who has taken on this responsibility but was actually out of town today.
Good evening, Commissioners. So we're going to do a brief overview of the guidelines, just an introduction again, reminder of why we do this each year, going through the red line or the changes that we've made from the 2013 guidelines, and then a quick summary of what happened in 2013, which thankfully was not a lot for us this year, and looking into the crystal ball for this coming year. So the reason that we do this each year is to provide direction in evaluating and responding to legislative activity, especially at the state level. There are hundreds of bills that get introduced. They move through the committees and the floors pretty quickly. Changes happen quickly. We very rarely would have time to come back for a review of a position that we're going to take with the UAC and Council. So at the beginning of each year, we come up with a set of guidelines that staff will use when looking at new or being asked to write a letter or take a position on a bill, that we can use this referred to. Anytime that an official position is taken, it does go through our city legislative process, which means, it goes up to city manager, it gets signed off by the mayor. So this is definitely not official positions that staff will take individually. So we have, the way that we arrange this, we have some overriding goals and guidelines for all of our utilities. And then just because of the way the legislative action happens between gas and electric, there are some very specific issues. So we split our guidelines by utility also. So we have these overriding goals, and then we have the utility-specific goals. As you will notice in previous years, the one that we do not have a specific section for is the fiber utility. And as in past years, we just have not identified, given our current level of involvement in that utility, we have not identified anything that isn't covered under the general utility section. Each of the sections has 4 main goals that we've identified, and we've worked these goals over the years, trying to get the right balance between the local accountability and the environmental impact, keeping low, stable rates, sustainability. So what we have on this slide is these overriding goals for all the utilities. When we're making changes in the guidelines, specifically when we add a new guideline, one of the ways that we make sure that we're consistent with our own strategic plan is that each of the new guidelines that we introduce has to meet, there's a guideline there to try and meet or achieve one of these already established goals that we have. And these underlying goals very much support the strategic objectives that were adopted in the 2011 Utility Strategic Plan. So some very basic issues: reliability and safety, customer service, managing costs, and environmental sustainability. So this next few slides, I'll just review some of the major changes. One of the attachments to the report had the red line, so you can see the changes we made from last year. I'm just going to go over substantive changes. As every year we find typos and ways to try and kind of clarify some of the language, so I'm not going to spend time on that, but we'll talk about the more substantive. In the all utility section, we added a new guideline to maintain existing low-cost financing options and advocate for new federal and state programs that recognize critical infrastructure needs. And I think that's, if you can see from the report, that will meet the goals of cost control, reliability, and local control of our programs. For the electric utility section, I'm highlighting the change we made into our one of our goals here. I don't think it's substantive. I think it's more of a clarification, but because it is one of the goals that we have spent so much time on with the wording, we added here that it's preserve just and reasonable rates bills as established by the local governing body. We had a new sub-guideline to balance the state and local policy implementation and ratepayer equity. This is just really, this kind of comes down to a lot of the policies, a lot of the new legislation that gets introduced can sometimes be counter to rate equity issues. So trying to have local accountability, local support, design of the rate, of our rates, while trying to meet the state and local policy goals. We modified guideline under number 6, just to clarify ensure equitable cost allocation, that we're following a beneficiary pays principle, which is a principle that we pretty much align with when we're looking at rate issues. And then we have a new guideline under number 6, which is to support the continuation of federal and state financial incentives to promote increased renewable development. So there are continuing moves at the federal level, especially to change some of the tax code that might impact our ability to fund, especially our renewable projects. Another issue that we have is they're looking at delta conveyance issues, and that could possibly impact our western-based resource allocation, so we'll be monitoring and evaluating that. Guideline 11, that's really is kind of a, we've modified it just to try and clarify what we mean here. There are cybersecurity issues, federal moves on cybersecurity regulation. We do not have any recognized critical cyber assets in our electric utility. So we would advocate to retain local control over our security needs while hopefully remaining exempt from the NERC cybersecurity standards. On the gas utility, we made the same language change into the goal number 4 to clarify that it's rates and bills established by our local governing body. We have another new sub-guideline to advocate for allowance allocation methodology to provide flexibility for Palo Alto to structure rates to align greenhouse gas costs and revenues. Now this is because in 2015 our gas utility will come under the cap and trade program. We're currently, the Air Resources Board is finalizing its rules and regulations for how we can use the allowances that will be allocated to the gas utility. So similar to our electric utility, we are anticipating that our gas utility will have a free allocation of allowances, and there is going to be similar restrictions on what we can do with that. Without getting too much into the details of it, they've along the way, ARB has tried to be very prescriptive on how we could allocate the allowance value that we sell back to our customers. And we've been trying to maintain as much flexibility as we can in designing our rates. This one might be a fun one. So under guideline number 9, so this was a guideline we introduced last year about fracking, hydraulic fracturing. It was very nebulous last year. We really didn't know what sort of legislation might be coming out, but we were aware that some things might. And sure enough, this past year, there was a whole slew of bills introduced at the state on hydraulic fracturing. Only one actually got through, but it did give us a little bit more focus, I think, on some of the issues that might come up. I don't think that the city is possibly going to be taking or the utility would take a active role in this, but certainly it's an interest to the joint action agencies that we work with. So what we're proposing is that we support legislation to protect public health and encourage transparency. So one of the issues that came up this year was having more transparencies in the chemicals that are used in the process, which kind of we, at least through CMUA, we supported that, but not have these blanket moratoriums on the production unless it's not supported by the science and studies. We had no substantive changes for the wastewater utility. And under the water utility, there's a couple of new guidelines under section number 5. One is about the San Francisco Public Utility Commission rate structure to stay consistent with our water supply agreement and be based on water usage. And also trying to get a modification to the dry year water allocation. And as I stated at the beginning, the fiber optic utility, we don't actually have a separate section for that. Just a little recap of what happened this past year, at least at the state level. It was a very unusual year. Not a lot happened, especially for publicly owned utilities such as Palo Alto. Some of the ones that did get a little bit of interest and passed was AB 327. So that started off really as it was really geared at the tier 1 and tier 2 rates of the investor-owned utilities to allow them to increase those slightly while trying to look after low-income customers. But it evolved over the process of the year. It actually allowed the PUC now to increase or allow an have the authority, to increase the RPS above 33%. So before that was thought of as kind of like a cap, Now the PUC has the authority to say, no, it shall be 40% or some other number. It also allowed some changes to the net energy metering rate structures. It does not apply to the public-owned utilities. Obviously, our authorities already have, our council can already order and have done a higher RPS than normal, and we did not have the rate freeze issues that the investor-owned utilities faced. Also on the electric side, there was a bill that passed, AB 792, which exempts production from renewable resources from utility users tax. This isn't really a utility issue or a municipal utility issue, because the utility tax is not, it's not just for cities that have their own utilities, but obviously it could have some impact on the general funds. Not a lot of an impact here, because our net energy metering customers have a de facto exemption from the utility users tax anyway. It doesn't turn up on their bill. The UUT is a percentage of the total bill, so they are already exempt. There may be some issue if we have fuel cells that are fueled by natural gas. It's a little unclear on that. And then there was the SB4, which does establish some kind of fracking regulatory program. So looking forward to 2014, RPS always. We had a short hiatus after the 33% was passed. There is now talk about trying to raise that. We've heard that someone may just introduce a 51% RPS just to get people talking. How likely that would be to pass in the next few years is pretty unlikely, but they want to get the conversation going again. The net energy metering, we may see a bill to adjust the current net energy metering cap to maybe align it more with the PUC utilities. And there's also a lot more emphasis now on what happens with cost shifting. So is there any cost shifting due to net energy metering? On energy storage, the Public Utilities Commission recently passed their decision, or just had their decision on energy storage requirements for the investor-owned utilities, which was quite an aggressive goal they set. Right now, we still have the ability to have our local councils set that level or say that it's not cost effective and not have any goals. Given the PUC's action, we might start to see some push to actually enforce some goals or requirements on us. A couple of other things. They're out there, the Proposition 39 from, was that 2 years ago? There's some work there on how the energy efficiency funds that were set aside will be used for schools and public buildings. And electric vehicles, there's continued momentum there to encourage electric vehicles. There are one of the bills that didn't go anywhere this year was to move certain functions from the California Department of Public Health to the State Water Resource Control Board. The governor is apparently very keen to move one of the programs over, so that's likely to happen in the next year. The water bond is very likely to get modified. Right now, I think it's still standing. It's an $11 billion bond, but it's likely that's going to be reduced and have more focused use. This is when I have someone else use it. Voter approval, threshold changes. I'm not sure what that one was. That was. Yeah, it was probably a budget issue on the majority for the budget approval. AB 32 draft scoping plan. So they've been redoing their scoping plan this year. They're starting to think about what's going to happen post 2020, because right now it just goes up to 2020. So they're starting to look about what are the interim goals to get to the 2050 reduction targets. For Western policy issues, if you recall from 2 years ago, 2012, we had the memo from Department of Energy looking at kind of revamping, restructuring the focus of the power marketing administrations, which would have, had it gone the way they had originally looked, would have really reduced the value of the asset or the resource that we have from Western. It has been ramped back. It took a lot of the retail programs that they were thinking of trying to fund through the Western program have been removed. But there is a proposal out on that, and we will continue to follow that. The Delta Reform Act, again, as we said before, possible impacts on our Western power. Continuing, this has been going on for quite a while, the contribution or the percentage of contribution of power customers to the Bureau of Reclamation's Central Valley project. And issues if there are delta tunnels about, how does those costs get allocated, and that goes back to our beneficiary pays concept. So at the federal level, we will continue to watch the cybersecurity activities. It's getting a lot of focus right now, a lot of scary stories out there. The FERC grid reliability activities and relationship we have with the regional reliability organizations. Again, the Power Marketing Administration rate structure and federal budget and tax-exempt bond financing. Trying to maintain those. So to last slide, our recommendation is that UAC recommends City Council adopt a resolution approving the proposed guidelines for 2014.
Well, I'd like to, first of all, commend the staff's use of the legislative policy guidelines. I think over years this has been a terrific tool to help staff to be responsive and to use everybody's time efficiently, and I just really like the sincerity and earnestness with which you draft them, with which you review them with us each year. And I just love the way it empowers staff for the next 365 days to be responsive and to help Palo Alto to be the leader that it is. So I really want to commend the whole concept as well as the use of the legislative policy guidelines. I have no objection with anything that you presented. I support it all. I guess I'd like to respond briefly or comment briefly on modified guideline number 9 for the gas utility. That's the guideline regarding fracking. I think that that's slide number 9. I think that the revision to the language that you've proposed is appropriate and sensible. In my opinion, there is no evidence that fracking done well and appropriately is worse than any alternative. And so what your guideline encourages Palo Alto is to do everything that we can to assure that fracking is done transparently and safely, and to encourage gas development companies to continue to develop the safest possible technologies for fracking. And I think that's exactly what's appropriate and exactly what we should do as an environmentally and sustainably conscious city. In addition to believing that it's the right thing to do from an environmental and sustainability point of view, I also think it's the only practical thing that we can do. In my opinion, it's completely impractical to think about banning fracking. As you point out, it's been going on throughout the country in California for decades, for much longer than people have been aware of it. we increasingly have an energy economy that depends on fracking, and I just don't think it's practical to imagine making fracking go away. So, so that's the only comment I have, and thank you very much.
Can I just ask for a clarification on this fracking issue? A little off point, but just what is, and Steve, you maybe will help, what is the debate about fracking then? If oh, this is terrible, but if all natural gas is obtained through fracking, what's the debate? Just for my own edification.
You're asking me to comment on what I think the public debate about fracking is?
Just so, because we've heard it twice now, and I just want to sort of understand. We can take it offline if you'd prefer. Yeah, take it offline.
When done,
I'll find out
when
later
done
if you-
irresponsibly, the casings, the concrete casings that are used leak, and then the chemicals that go down there leak into the water table, and then it impacts.
So the issue is not fracking versus not fracking, it's fracking responsibly versus fracking
That's what we,
irresponsibly.
exactly, and I've run into experts elsewhere in
Okay.
the field who have said precisely that. You can do it responsibly and safely. It's when you don't do it responsibly and safely that you have huge environmental impacts.
And so the sort of public discussion of fracking versus non-fracking is completely misleading because, to the point made earlier, all natural gas is obtained through fracking, and it's just responsible versus irresponsible.
Well, there's no doubt that sometime in the more distant past, there were well casings that were constructed badly, and that led to environmental problems. And of course, there's an ongoing question about fugitive emissions, which is a broader question about
Right.
whether natural gas is really as environmentally friendly as we think, and it depends on the magnitude of fugitive emissions and how successful we're going to be at controlling them now that we're focusing more on them. There is for sure a small but very vocal minority worried about things like these very, very small seismic events and wondering if they can trigger earthquakes, and wondering if, even if you have well-designed well casings, can you still get contamination of groundwater supplies that are thousands of feet vertically removed from where the gas is located. I know of no experts who, nor do I know of any data to support those more extreme concerns. But for sure, there are people who are concerned about that group that I've characterized as vocal but small.
Got it. That's very helpful. Helps me understand the exact nature of the debate. Thank you. Other comments?
I had a couple of questions. The first was on slide number 6, the one that deals with changes for all utilities. When I read that, it has a general sensible sound to me. But I was wondering if you have something more specific in mind for that, or an example of something that you're concerned about that would be harmful to the city.
This one's really about the some of the tax financing issues. So let me bring up the. Sorry, I probably should have done the roundup of 2013 and the look forward for 2014 before we showed you the changes. But so the federal budget and tax-exempt bond financing, those, with what's going on in the federal government now with budget issues, with the sequestra, that
Right.
the bonds, some of our tax-exempt bond financing, it's under threat.
Okay, got it. All right, that makes perfect sense. I had just a comment, not really a question, about another slide. Yeah.
Can I just go back to that, I don't mean to belabor this, but we really were impacted by changes that occurred because of what was happening on the federal level. We had Build America bonds to help our water utility for the emergency water supply project, which gave us a very good discount. That discount went away because they sort of had to take away that. The federal government was funding the discount, and they had to remove those discounts. So it wasn't huge for us, but there certainly was an impact.
Impacts. Thank you for that clarification. I had a question about slide number 8, the one that has to do with, it's guideline number 11 on that slide. And I believe when you say that the CPAU does not currently have critical cyber assets, I'm not asking you to describe whether they are, the levels of criticality, but I suspect that the context of that is within NERC guidelines. If NERC's...
Yes.
Okay. Because I think that somebody reading this might feel that you're not paying attention to cybersecurity issues and your SCADA systems and your wireless communication systems related to those, and I believe you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
We should probably, maybe we'll capitalize that. I mean, it is a defined term,
Okay.
so maybe we'll address it like that or something. It is literally a defined term.
Under NERC.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
got it. And the other one is just a general question. I scanned these guidelines related to water for issues that may directly affect CPAU, and related to the supplies out of Hetch Hetchy. One of the biggest issues that's going on right now, I think, is something which is not legislatively involved, but could be. Certainly on a policy issue, it would be something that you'd be concerned about. And that is the Delta Water Quality Program guidelines, the Phase 1 effort, for example, which came out with a recommendation by the state board just within this past year that 35% of true natural flow, which is the runoff upstream of the reservoirs, be passed directly through downstream, which, as the numbers had indicated, would cut back your supplies substantially in a dry year, really quite badly. And so I'm not suggesting that the environmental purposes for that are not well motivated and that the science doesn't support some of that. It may or may not, I don't know. But the point I was making is that it seems to be an area to be highly involved, because your water supply in a critically dry year really would be affected badly if that particular recommendation stood fast. So I'm wondering where in these guidelines, if anywhere, you would address that.
Yes, the delta flow criteria is definitely an issue, one that we've been watching for the past few years.
Right.
And, depending what they came up with, it wouldn't just be dry year impact to us. It could be any time. It's also an issue of it moving generation from a high value part of the year to less valuable parts of the year. So it's not just the amount, it's the value of it.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure we got it on our electrics one. I think we have a whole section on Western issues. 6.
Are you asking why it's only included on the electric guidelines and not in the water guidelines? Because our Tuolumne River water could be affected?
Just my scan of all of these guidelines didn't lead to a place where we were looking at the delta efforts around water quality.
Yeah, so under electric, number 7, so this is advocate for congressional, legislative, or administrative actions on matters impacting costs or operations for the Western Area Power Administration. So that's kind of like the the main section, and then under that, we've got a lot of sub guidelines. So I think we got balancing efforts for competing environmental improvements in rivers and delta conditions with water supply and hydropower impacts.
Okay. That's really the place where you would drive your attention to the Delta plan.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. It sounds like it's in there. It sounds like you've got it.
Is anyone over?
So we're debating here, Jane and I, as we tend to do. And we're wondering if under also the water guidelines, we capture some of the concerns around what might happen with delta conveyance a bit, either through number 1, where we're fully aligned with other BOSCA members and certainly the SFPUC, and also number 3, when it comes to some extent, water. Otherwise, that would be impacting our Hetch Hetchy Yeah, it creates no additional exposure to more frequent or severe water shortages. So, I mean, it's not explicit, but we are, on that very issue, going to be pretty well aligned with the SFPUC,
Right. Okay,
and we'll advocate with them.
all right. Thank you.
Any other comments? Motion?
I move to approve the legislative guidelines as proposed by staff.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. Excellent. Moving along to
So
next-
our next item, energy storage targets, if you are inclined to move along, we don't have to do any sort of presentation. I would like to acknowledge up front an intern who helped us put this together. His name is Larson Plano. He's just waving at you. And he worked with our senior resource planner, Shiva Swami Nathan, to put this together.
Excellent. How long, Larson, how long have you been with us?
Well, we don't want to tell you where he is now.
Okay. Well, how come? Because now, of course, I have to ask where he is now. All right. I'll have to get that offline. In any event, thank you for your work on this.
PG&E.
Ah, okay. That's okay. We have a few people at CPA who have spent time at PG&E, so it's okay. Would people like to see the presentation?
Yeah, so just at the end of the day, the recommendation is that we determine that a target for Palo Alto utilities to procure energy storage systems is not appropriate due to lack of cost-effective options. And we're required to find we're required to have a finding under California state law.
Okay.
Does it strike anybody else other than me as odd that we're having to recommend that the council adopt a policy not to do something that we're not doing? It's just crazy. But that's the way the state works. I move the staff recommendation.
I'll second that.
Any comment?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. Maybe this is just the engineer in me showing, but I thought it was a wonderful report and a wonderful document, and I learned a lot and enjoyed it immensely. I absolutely support the conclusion and the recommendation. I just thought I'd mention two thoughts about it. The focus is on cost, and the reason why we're recommending not to do anything is because it's not cost effective. It turns out there's another issue that's not part of the law, but it takes a lot of energy to build a battery, and that embodied energy is an additional issue that's problematic when you look at these energy storage techniques. You can find yourself in a situation, and it's an issue with renewable energy too, you can find yourself in a situation where you're investing so much energy up front in the manufacture of these materials and these products that it actually takes you some time to recover the energy that it took you to build it. And it's an active area of research right now, trying to figure out where that matters and where that doesn't matter. The impact is different on something like greenhouse gas emissions than it is, say, on being able to provide energy at the time of day that you need it. So as Palo Alto continues to try to be a leader in doing these things right, we may want to think about cost implications as well as embodied energy, and there's increasingly good research available on how to think about embodied energy. I also wanted to mention that a lot of the technologies described in this memo that we believe are not yet ready economically to be implemented in a widespread way are important active areas of research, and as mentioned in the memo, could easily and sensibly be part of some of our innovation activities here in Palo Alto. And so the fact that we're not deploying these things in a widespread way doesn't at all mean that the city of Palo Alto is opposed to energy storage. In fact, quite the opposite, and I would encourage us to continue to look for opportunities to use our innovation fund and our other resources to work with big companies and startup companies and university researchers and people at national labs, all of whom are developing prototype energy storage technologies, many of whom would love to be trying these out with Palo Alto.
I have a similar comment of having learned quite a bit through reading this and thought it was really well put together, including the appendices, which I think are good standalone references and very credible piece of work. I just had a question. If you get to page B10 in the attachments, since they are so good, I got.
Just trying to show off. Yeah,
I know,
right.
I know. You can see I ride BART and Caltrain, so I have time. There's a statement there about, or some calculations about regulation and power reliability benefits. And there's a calculation that, similarly to SMUD, we think a present value of the benefits of those, that service would be about $400 a kilowatt hour. That's quite a bit of money. And I realize it's not cost effective for us to install. So the question is really just simple, just to make it more real for me. In the future, could you conceive of give me a practical example of where something like that might have an application in Palo Alto in the future when perhaps distribution systems are different than today or whatever? What is a tangible example about where you would install one of those systems and what would it really do?
Okay, yeah, so the greatest value, there are two parts to this value, which is making the push for storage. One is integration with renewables, because when renewables are intermittent, they come on and off, the storage can absorb. We are looking at when we had our RFPs for PV projects and different renewable projects, one of the optionality we're asking from our supply is the ability to put storage at their location if and when the regulation market, which is supposed to balance the PV load, comes about. Right now, the regulation price, which is the ability for generation to go up and down to follow the different intermittent renewable price, is relatively low. It's expected to double, triple in the next 5-10 years as intermittent penetration goes up. We have sufficient, hydro project has ability to follow load sufficiently.
Right.
So that's, if there is, at that time when the regulation price goes up, the storage may make more sense, and if prices come down, it might make more sense for us to invest in such technologies. That's one aspect. The other is distribution system. Most of our feeders, we have about 60 electric feeders which spider out from our substations, which has sufficient capacity. If those feeders if the load grows, EVs or in residential neighborhood there is large loads, which will require us to upgrade those feeders, and we don't anticipate anything in the next 10 years to happen in that regard. But if our feeders are overloaded, having a storage in our substation could help alleviate the loading on our feeder. So these are, we think, at least 5 to 10 years away, and prices will have to come down substantially. The comparative price is about $1,000 to $2,000 a kW, okay, whereas the value is only $400 to $800.
Got it. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anything else? I think we had our motion, and all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
All opposed? None. Okay, Director Fong, next issue. Oops.
Can you repeat who moved and who seconded?
Who approved? I believe Commissioner Eglash, did you make the motion on that one? I think you did.
Who
I think you seconded
moved
it.
and who?
Commissioner Eglash made the motion. Commissioner Hall seconded.
Okay, Eglash and Hall, thank
Vote
you.
was unanimous. Next up, let me see now. Evaluation of cost effectiveness of residential gas to electric fuel switching options.
Here we're going to have Resource Planner Christine Tam walk us through the proposal, but the person who did a lot of the research behind it was another intern whose name is Andrea Romano.
And is Andrea still with us or off to bigger and better places? Not that there is any.
I heard through somebody I met one night that she's going to Navigant.
Congratulations.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm here today to present the evaluation results of our view switching analysis. And as Val mentioned, the bulk of that analysis was done by Andrea. So this, the request for this evaluation actually came out from City Council to look at options for the city to further reduce the city's carbon footprint. This is after the adoption of a carbon neutral electric portfolio. And outside of the electric utility, the gas utility and the transportation sectors are the two main areas that are prime targets for emissions reductions potential. And within these two sectors, we specifically focus on the Palo Alto residents and what they can do to reduce their emissions associated with natural gas appliances and with their vehicle mileage. So overall statistics for the city, Palo Alto residents consume about 45% of the city's natural gas load. And the bulk of that natural gas usage is for water heating and space heating, with a little bit on use for cooking and for clothes drying. And as for vehicle miles driven, Palo Alto residents account for between 30 to 40% of the total vehicle miles driven. So if you look at this pie chart here, you can see that for a typical single-family household, the natural gas consumption, appliance consumption, and their car driving habits accounts for close to 40% of their greenhouse gas footprint. The rest of it comes primarily from their diet and from their flying, which is not surprising. And if we drill down a little bit more on just the natural gas appliances, we can see that water heating and space heating account for the bulk of the natural gas appliance, or the natural gas usage from their home appliances. So for this analysis, we looked at the appliance alternatives, specifically at the 4 end uses: water heating, space heating, cooking, and clothes drying. The baseline gas appliances are standard efficiency equipment. So for a water heater, these are the typical gas water heater with a standard efficiency of energy factor of 0.62. And the gas furnace, those are standard efficiency gas furnace, a gas stovetop, and a gas clothes dryer. And for the electric replacement, we are considering the heat pump water heater, the air source heat pump as a replacement for gas furnace, electric induction cooktop, and electric clothes dryer. For the vehicle alternatives, the baseline that we're looking at are the Honda Civic, which is a compact vehicle, and as a replacement or an alternative to the Honda Civic, we looked at the natural gas Honda Civic model, the Nissan Leaf, and the Prius plug-in. And for a bigger size passenger vehicle, we looked at Toyota Camry as our baseline, and we compare that to the Chevy Volt and the Ford C-Max model. So as an economic analysis, as a benchmark, we looked at the life cycle net present value and compare that NPV, or net present value, for the baseline model and the alternatives. The net present value would include the equipment costs, the ongoing fuel maintenance costs, as well as the carbon cost. And we would say that the fuel switching option would be cost effective if the net present value of the alternative fuel equipment is lower than the net present value of the baseline equipment. We also did the analysis from both a societal and a customer perspective, the societal being the Palo Alto community perspective, and the customer being the household, the single-family household perspective. So from a societal perspective, water heater replacement options, as shown in this chart, is shown to be, or fuel switching is not cost effective. The standard gas water heater has a net present value of about $2,600. And compare that with the heat pump electric water heater, that's almost twice as much as the standard gas water heater. Solar water heater, as also as shown in this chart, is also very expensive, almost 3 times in one case with the electric backup. One thing I do want to point out is that for the societal perspective, we compare the commodity cost of the for the electricity with the natural gas commodity cost. So when we replace the gas water heater, we actually save on the natural gas commodity cost, but we add on the electric fuel cost. And similarly, for space heater replacement, the electric replacement is not cost effective. And the same conclusion is also drawn for the cooktop and the clothes drying. Switching over to the vehicle purchase options, we have the 2 baseline model, the Honda Civic and the Toyota Camry. And in this chart, it shows that the Honda Civic natural gas is pretty comparable to the Honda Civic the net present value. The Nissan Leaf model is shown to have a lower lifetime cost than the Honda Civic. The 3 plug-in electric vehicles shown in this chart with the red bars are pretty comparable to the Toyota Camry. And in these calculations, we also include the federal and state incentives of between $4,000 to $10,000 per vehicle for the electric vehicles. Now, even though, going back to the previous slide, even though the Honda Civic and the Honda Civic natural gas model and the Nissan Leaf have pretty similar net present value, when we look at the avoided emissions over the lifetime, the Nissan Leaf have a much higher avoided emissions over the lifetime of an 11-year ownership of the car. The plug-in models have varying avoided emissions due to the battery size and their driving range. So when we stack up the marginal cost of avoided emissions, we can see that the Nissan Leaf has a negative abatement cost of negative $141. And after that, buying the offsets, which is what Carla just mentioned in the Palo Alto Green Gas Program at a cost of about $8 per ton, that's the next lowest cost of abatement cost. So switching over to the customer perspective, when we look at the customer perspective, we have to keep in mind that the customer are paying electric rates, and their electric rates are tiered. So depending on their total electric usage, they could be on a tier 1 rate or a tier 2 rate or a tier 3 rate. So when we look at the different replacement model, we try to evaluate the customer costs depending on whether the customer is in the tier 2 electric rate or whether they're on a tier 3 electric rate. So for water heater replacement, if they switch from a gas water heater to a heat pump electric water heater, and they can still remain in the tier 2 electric usage, the total cost of owning that heat pump electric water heater would be comparable to the gas water heater. And this includes the rebates that the Palo Alto utility offers to the customers. However, if they are currently a high electric user, switching over to an electric heat pump water heater will put them into the tier 3. They will be paying a lot more for the ongoing operating costs of the heat pump water, and that would not be a cost-effective switch over. If the customer has a solar PV system, that the cost effectiveness would depend on how much their solar PV system costs them. So if they can somehow install a solar PV system at a cost of less than $4.50 per watt, then it would make sense for them to switch over to a heat pump water heater, as shown in this chart here. Now, we did similar analysis for space heating and stovetop and clothes dryer, and we found that none of those other options are cost effective to switch over to electric. Oops. For vehicle replacement, from a customer perspective, we do find that it would make sense for customers to switch from a Honda Civic to a Honda Civic natural gas or a Nissan Leaf, or to switch from a Toyota Camry to either a Prius plug-in, a Ford C-Max, or a Chevy Volt. This analysis actually assumes that the customer will go into the tier 3 rate. An average median, actually I should say the median single-family household currently uses approximately 6,000 kilowatt hours of electricity annually, and to charge a Chevy Volt, which is an all-electric vehicle, it would actually increase the electric usage by about 50%. So their annual energy usage will be bumped up by about another 3,000 kilowatt hours, which would definitely put them in the tier 3 electric rate. So the staff recommendation is to promote the Palo Alto Green Gas Program. It is the most cost-effective way for residents to reduce their carbon footprint associated with their gas appliances. Another program that we are anticipating that the utility would participate is the Low Carbon Fuel Standard Program. This is a program I think is run by the ARB to encourage lower emissions fuel standards for the transportation sector.
Yes, yeah, low carbon fuel standards. So there's through the low carbon fuel standard program. Is Shiva here? He might. I've been pounding on him on this one, but anyway, there's some value to be had in us participating and getting value, claiming the value from low carbon fuel standards for instance, electric vehicle owners here in the city. I've suggested in the past that if the dollars are insignificant, then staff time to go and get those dollars is going to anyway be overshadowed by the cost the benefit would be overshadowed by staff time. At this point, I think the way we're looking at it is there could be adequate benefit if we participate in the low carbon fuel standard program that would more than compensate staff time. But I think we are looking at it.
So another recommendation that staff is making is to evaluate the options to help our residents procure solar PV at the rate of $4.50 per watt or less. And also, we would like to undertake an evaluation of the cost effectiveness for the city to lease a fleet of electric vehicle or plug-in electric vehicle. As I mentioned, because of the way that the electric rates are tiered and the gas rates are also tiered, by having residents switch from gas appliances to electric appliances, it kind of penalizes the residents by putting them in the higher tier rate. So there may be an opportunity to look at developing rates for all electric households or buildings. Although there are a lot of constraints that may come with changing the rate structure. And the last recommendation that staff is making is to consider fuel switching incentives for residential new construction projects. And I'm open to any questions and feedback at this point.
I have a couple questions and a couple comments. I think the advocates of fuel switching in Palo Alto aren't focusing so much on the cost as they are the environmental benefits of fuel switching. My sense is that the people in Palo Alto that are interested in fuel switching, and in fact, I think the whole reason for this project was their perception that having moved to a carbon-free electric supply in the city, that it made sense to take a look at encouraging people to move away from burning gas to using carbon-free electricity. And although your economic model included carbon, there's not a lot of discussion, at least not that I could pull out of either the memo or the presentation, on how you put a value on carbon. And so I was wondering if you could take a moment right now, either you or some of the others here tonight, to comment on how you treated the environmental impact in this study.
For the carbon costs, we are assuming the current market indicatives of the carbon allowances for at the CARB level, the cap and trade program run by the ARB. So for the gas utility, even though the gas utility currently is not coming under the cap and trade program, we are assuming that we place the same cost of carbon as currently priced for the electric side.
It's incorporating your resource cost calculations.
Right. Yeah. Right. The carbon from the natural gas utility is monetized on the same basis as the cap and trade market.
You want to talk about the sensitivities you ran, doubling it, and still didn't make difference. The sensitivity.
Yeah, so another thing that we also did is we did a sensitivity analysis to see if it would make sense from a societal perspective, whether it would become cost effective to switch over, and we found that even if the price of carbon doubles from the current estimate of about $12 per ton to $24 per ton, it would still not be completely, it would not be cost effective. I think it needs to, the cost of carbon needs to double, and there's one more condition that needs to happen before it becomes cost effective.
As I'll comment in a minute when I move from making questions to making comments, I actually agree with the conclusion you've come to, but I want to set that aside for a minute because I'm concerned that there's a group of people in Palo Alto that are very concerned, extraordinarily concerned about sustainability and greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm concerned that they're going to feel like we got it wrong here, that we set up the problem incorrectly, that we asked the wrong question, and as a result came up with an irrelevant answer. I'm concerned that there's a group of people in Palo Alto who don't want to know if it's cost effective. They want to know if it makes environmental sense, even if it costs more. There are people who do things all the time that cost money because they're the right thing to do environmentally. Palo Alto Green Electric is an example of that. Palo Alto Green Gas that we talked about tonight is another example of that. So how do we respond to those people who, I'm concerned, will read this or watch this on television tonight and say that we asked the wrong question and therefore came up with an irrelevant answer?
So You know, I don't know if this is responsive to the question. I understand the question. I think this is a point in time where we're saying it doesn't really, even when you include the environmental, even when you monetize the environmental attribute, it doesn't make good sense to propose this fuel switching. I certainly would say we're not precluding doing that when some of the economics change. And this is something that we're going to continue to track. But at this point in time, it doesn't really make sense because we have monetized also the environmental attributes, and they're not coming up on an economic basis.
I think there are some people who would believe that even monetizing the carbon doesn't accurately represent the issue. I think there are some people who would want to evaluate whether it makes sense to switch fuels or not, looking only at carbon, not looking at cost in dollars at all. So in that scenario, the way they would set up the problem if they were here tonight to speak for themselves is to not try to put a price on carbon, but to just try to look at the environmental impact of using, and here I'm focusing primarily on appliances. So I think there's a group of people who would simply want to know, is there an environmental benefit to getting Palo Alto residents to replace their gas, water, and space heaters with electric water and space heaters? And I'm concerned that, and maybe I'm wrong, but my sense is there are some hundreds of people in the city for whom that's the question, and we haven't answered that question.
Sorry, I had a couple answers for that, and I agree with you that, but I think if you look at this analysis, and I think this is an accurate analysis, people will come to a different conclusion than we did. I think if you look at the different appliances, we say this costs more, they say it doesn't cost much more. If you believe that carbon has a certain value, you can turn to, for example, figure 9 on page 11 and say, for me, the value of carbon is $500 a ton. So I'm going to do all these things. And so I think for an individual who has that opinion, this will support that conclusion. And I think, you know, for electric vehicles, if you look, many of them, as Christine pointed out, are essentially the same cost over the 11-year ownership period. And so I think they could conclude from this analysis, hey, I'm going to go buy a car, particularly a Nissan Leaf. And I think many of the appliances are pretty much the same. They look at this and say, you know, overall, it's really not going to cost me that much more. And so my feeling is, I hope that they would agree generally with the analysis, but they may have a different conclusion from it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that is exactly the discussion and answer that I was looking for, that there can be an economic analysis, and the economic analysis has as an input the price of carbon, but there can also be an analysis that's not an economic analysis at all, that might lead to a different conclusion. I had one more question, then I really did want to share my own thoughts. One of the charts that you shared with us was avoided greenhouse gas emissions for vehicle options. Was there a reason why you didn't show a similar chart for the appliance choices? Because again, I think it's a follow-up on what we've been talking about. I think there's a group of Palo Alto residents who are really focused on switching space and water heaters from gas to electric because of the environmental benefit or perceived environmental benefit of doing so.
I think actually, if you look at figure 1.
I'm sorry, table?
Figure 1 in page 2, that chart that shows the focus of the fuel switching, and it kind of zooms in and look at just the emissions by the appliance type. It shows here relatively the water heater has an annual emissions of about 1.3 metric ton versus space heater, which is 1.3 metric ton, versus the oven, which is 0.2 metric ton, versus the dryer, which is just 0.1 metric ton. So it gives you a sense of how they compare, how they stack up. Slide 7. Oh, so I was actually referring to this chart here. So you can see the relative emissions footprints of the different natural gas appliances.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I was just noting that there was a table, a chart in your presentation labeled avoided GHG emissions for vehicle options, and I didn't think there was an equivalent chart for appliances, but you're right, we can get the information from other charts. So I did want to share some of my own thoughts on this. I actually think that appliance fuel switching from gas to electricity is a very bad idea, is a profoundly bad idea. And so I do totally support your conclusion, if anything, even more strongly than you yourself. And I wanted to take a minute to explain why. City of Palo Alto electricity isn't really, truly carbon-free. It's carbon-free perhaps in a legal sense and perhaps in an accounting sense, but not in a physical sense. We get our electricity off of the Western grid, and the Western grid has a mix that includes nuclear and large hydro and natural gas. And so the only sense in which we really have carbon-free electricity here is in an accounting sense, where we can say that we are buying as much carbon-free electricity as we're using. But at any moment in time, we're pulling electricity off of a grid that's not a carbon-free grid. It's as if we were pulling water out of a pool, and sure, we're putting in as much fresh water in that pool as we're pulling out, but there are plenty of other people putting water in that pool that isn't fresh, and it's a pool. And so I think if this is in no way to minimize the significance and the wonderful thing we've done in moving to a zero carbon electric supply. I think it's wonderful and commendable, and we're all proud of it. But what we're talking about when we talk about fuel switching is taking that carbon-free nature so seriously that we're going to move from gas to electricity. And at least for me, that really raises the bar and raises the ante and forces us to be even more critical about the degree to which that electricity is or isn't carbon-free. Gas for space heating and water heating is really efficient. Gas is a really good way to heat homes and water. And given that a significant fraction of the electricity on the Western grid is produced from gas, if we propose fuel switching, what we're saying is instead of using gas to heat water and space directly, we're going to convert gas to electricity, and then we're going to use that electricity to heat space and water. And each time you do an energy transformation, there's an inefficiency associated with that. It entails energy losses. Another problem that I have with encouraging fuel switching for homeowners is disposing of a water heater or a space heater that hasn't reached the end of its useful life yet is just an awful thing to do. It goes into a landfill. There's the embodied energy in those pieces of equipment that's now being wasted, and there's the capital cost of doing that, which of course was part of your calculation. And so I think we need to think very carefully, as you have, before we encourage the citizens of Palo Alto to throw away a perfectly good gas, water, or space heater and replace it with an electric heater. So for all of those reasons, I think appliance fuel switching is a very bad idea, and I certainly am glad that we're not encouraging people tonight to do it. Thanks for indulging my lengthy comments.
I had a quick question. In fact, it tees off Commissioner Eglish's last point. If you look at your slide on the bottom of page 7 of the handout, it may be slide 12 or 14 on when you go to electronic. It's the customer perspective water heater replacement. Yes. I think that what this calculation does is assume that there's someone who does not have a water heater currently. Either they're in a new situation without a heater, or their existing heater just died and they have to make a decision between. The reason I do that, I look at your base case and it includes a installation cost for a new heater. So I think what Commissioner Eglash says makes that even a stronger case for not switching. For example, I have a water heater right now that's probably going to last another few years before it unfortunately dies and puts me in the situation that this graph depicts. Do I either buy a new gas heater, or do I abandon gas and move to electric? I think I'm just checking with you that that's the basis at which this calculation is done.
Yeah, so this is a scenario of replace on burnout, assuming that your existing water heater dies and you have to make a decision now whether you want to replace it with a gas water heater or go out and purchase a new electric water heater, and you'll most likely, we actually assume adding an additional panel because it would draw a lot more energy than your current panel can handle.
Got it.
So that would be an additional cost to put that panel in.
All right. I guess the perspective I'm just saying is when folks consider this, there would be even a worse. I'm just saying again the first point I think I conveyed. That is, you have even a worse situation from a customer perspective if you have a perfectly good water heater now and consider a switch.
Yeah, that would make the economics look worse.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes. All right. And then the other thing is just on your very, very last slide, I have a quick question and then I'm done. Yes. So right down towards the end, the last bullet, when you advise or consider fuel switching incentives for residential new construction projects, would that be based on those incentives first of all be based on a societal perspective, or trying to put your feet in the shoes of a customer who's trying to make a rational decision from a customer perspective? Which incentive basis would you use?
We haven't really decided one way or the other. Part of the reason we're like to look at the residential new construction projects and encouraging fuel switching, possibly encouraging fuel switching by providing an incentive, is to help kind of meet the statewide strategic plan of getting to a net zero home, or some percentage of new construction homes to be net zero by 2020.
Net zero?
Net zero energy home.
Okay. All right.
Is it net zero carbon, or is it?
So this is to do a little bit with building codes, right? And then if you go to a green building code, well, how can you help customers comply with the new green building code, which might tend to lead toward, zero emissions for the houses, and this could be one way to do it. Okay.
So I think that one of the things that the dilemmas would be, once you look at your economics and realize how poor it is from a conclusion point of view to switch from gas to electric, either in a space heating or water heating, it'd be difficult for me to imagine incentives that would push customers to do the opposite. Because
if it's for new construction, a lot of the upfront costs would be eliminated. So just going back to the water heater example, if we have to switch from a gas water heater to an electric water heater, we'll have to pay for an additional electric panel, which we assume to be $800. But if it's a new construction project, that cost wouldn't be there. So it could potentially be cost effective, although we haven't done that analysis.
Okay.
So I think the overall principle for utility rebates is it needs to be cost effective from a societal perspective, with some exceptions, of course, for low-income programs or for innovation technology programs.
Got
so for as a rule of thumb, utility incentives are only offered for cost-effective measures.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
So that's an interesting line of question on new construction. I don't know what the new green building codes are, but if you take this to a logical conclusion, you wouldn't, part of the cost savings was you wouldn't even have to plumb the house for gas at all. There wouldn't even be a gas main or a gas meter. It would be an all-electric construction, and that cost saving might be, but I'm not familiar with the state's new green building code, so I don't know if they've gone, I don't know how far they've gone on that. You don't know either?
Well, we probably have people in the department that know, that work closely with the planning department. The planning department actually is the one that issues the building codes. But I do know that there have been very much ramped up requirements. And do you know? You might know. That the state is indeed, but it's getting harder and harder to achieve a lot of the efficiency measures that we're looking to because of the increased requirements. And then the appliances are definitely getting more efficient. There's less achievement to be had going forward, and that's what people are going to be installing.
Still time for me. I have a very brief comment, and that is I am strongly supportive of all the recommendations and next steps, all 6 of them, and that's my only comment.
This was not an action item for you, so we appreciate very much the insights and the feedback.
Okay, thank you for your work on that. Potential topics for discussion at a future UAC meeting. Anyone have anything they want to add?
I wanted to socialize a thought. You know, Palo Alto has such a wonderful history of leadership and environmentalism and innovation. You know, we had a more aggressive RPS than California, and that was a source of great pride for years. In fact, we saved money with our green purchases. That then set us up for having zero carbon electricity, and we all took huge pride in that. Palo Alto Green was a wonderful thing. Palo Alto Green Electric was a wonderful thing, and we hope that when it rises from the ashes, it will, Palo Alto Green Electric too will also be wonderful, and now Palo Alto Green Gas. I have the feeling that if we want to continue to provide leadership in this area, there may be other kinds of areas that it's time to start looking at more aggressively. And I know some of these are already on your map, but I guess I'm bringing it up here this evening because I even have a little bit of the feeling from the discussion of Palo Alto Green Gas that we're going to start to reach a point of diminishing return, and that there are some other kinds of things that could really allow us to regain leadership and momentum. And I'm thinking of 2 categories of things. One that I'm thinking of is really trying to find a way of moving forward on energy efficiency and renewable energy on schools and perhaps public buildings in general. I still believe we have a lot of citizens here that would really be thrilled with some way to divert a few dollars each month to energy efficiency investments and renewable energy investments in schools, perhaps other public buildings, but certainly schools. And I haven't thought at all about how to do it and what such a program might look like, and if it would end up looking more like a charity or more like Palo Alto Green. But investments in energy efficiency and renewable energies in our schools become like an annuity that pays dividends for generations. And we have a lot of people here who care about environmentalism and care about our schools. So I would love to see that not just be part of a long list of things that we think about when we think about what Palo Alto Green might evolve to, but I would really love to have us at some point during the next year, find a way to really focus earnestly on whether that idea or other similar innovative ideas might lead us to establish new programs. I also think tonight's idea about a local carbon offset was just an absolutely fascinating idea. And, just as I think people in Palo Alto would love to write a check to help make schools more energy efficient or have local renewable energy, I suspect if there were some way that we could provide leadership and guidance for people to produce local carbon offsets. I mean, maybe it's as simple as just planting more trees in Palo Alto. Maybe it's something more sophisticated than that. Again, I just think it might be really exciting. So if these are just totally, they're not even half-baked ideas, they're totally unbaked ideas, but I guess I just wanted to share a feeling. It's not much more than a feeling tonight, but a feeling that things like Palo Alto Green and Palo Alto Gas, that's great, but maybe there's a whole different class and category of things beyond that where we can continue to really provide leadership, innovation, and environmentalism.
Other comments? Actually, I guess technically this is selection of topics for a future UAC meeting, but of course the next item is commissioner comment, so I'll accept either. Okay, I have some. First of all, I agree with what Commissioner Eglash said, and interestingly, I was going to comment on something somewhat similar, and that is the Green Business Leaders. This is, I believe, the second year that Palo Alto has bestowed this award on buildings that are Energy Star rated. I think it's a great program. I think it acknowledges those building owners who have taken steps to make their buildings energy efficient. And I would have a couple of comments. One is, I heard about this, I knew about it when it occurred last year. I heard about it, I guess, Debbie, you sent it out in your media updates when it occurred this year. But I didn't know about it beforehand, and I think I would encourage, I hope CPAU is taking an effort. It's great to recognize people after the fact, but what's really good about something like this is to go to people 6 months ahead of time and say, or a year ahead of time or whatever, and say, next year we're going to have another set of awards. And, it's not too late to upgrade your building, or maybe your building's already upgraded and you just have to get Energy Star certification. So I'd love to see CPAU do that, and perhaps CPAU is already doing it. One thing that could be done, I'd start by just letting us know about it ahead of time, and I'd be happy to reach out to people I know who are building owners and the like and suggest them to participate.
Consider yourself told.
Sounds good. All right, well, but
John, may I comment on your comment?
Yes, but let me just comment on Val's comment, and then you can comment on my comment. And then, of course, and that is, but a reminder wouldn't kill us.
We're going to do it again.
Sounds good. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
I guess I just wanted to underscore, in case not everyone appreciates, everyone's heard of LEED certified buildings that were designed to be energy efficient. Here we're talking about something that is probably a whole lot more important than that. We're talking about actually measuring the performance of buildings, and it's emerged that one of the problems with LEED certification is that it's how the building is designed, not how the building actually performs once commissioned. And so this is really good stuff and really important stuff because it's looking at how buildings actually operate.
I agree. Thank you for saying that. I'll go off while we're on energy efficiency of buildings. A topic that has come up in Palo Alto from time to time, although not particularly at this commission, it's something I've discussed with Director Fong, is something that larger cities around the country, including San Francisco, have done, which is to require commercial building owners to disclose the energy use of their buildings. New York was the first, San Francisco's done it, and one major city after another has done it. But interestingly, as of yet, no smaller city, and that's not that surprising. It takes some work and a little easier for a larger city to do. On the other hand, a city with its own municipal utility has a significant head start over other cities, and it would be at some time, someday, some smaller city is going to go first on that, and Palo Alto would be an excellent one to do so. I've discussed it with Director Fong, and there is a question as to whether an effort like that is really more appropriately a utility department issue versus a building, and so on and so forth. And I've discussed this with the city manager, Jim Keene, and it seems appropriate that this would be a very appropriate thing for the city's new chief sustainability officer perhaps to take a lead on when he or she is hired someday. I don't know when that will occur. But in any event, I continue to think it's a great idea. And if we don't ever hire a chief sustainability officer, maybe I'll send a colleague's memo around on it. Director Fine, it looks like you have a comment to make on that.
I believe that Assistant Director Tom Ozen is already working with, in large part, the Development Center to try to get some way to get a database developed that would really start to help measure and help building owners understand how their buildings are doing, and it certainly can lead to more disclosures, but that might require something, some action by council at some point. But in any event, we are moving forward on things even without the benefit of a chief sustainability officer right now, who hopefully would adopt this and take it to the next level. But yep, we've heard you over the years.
Sounds good. I'm delighted to hear it. I do have, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, just to jump in on that point, I'm really interested if there's ever a time in which he has something that he's ready for prime time just to share, even as an interim status on that. I would be very interested to hear about how he's doing with that.
Sure. I don't think we're there yet, but yes.
Okay, another issue, and this can be under commissioner comments or potential topics. This city has spent the last, I don't know how many years, but several years, looking at the issue of an anaerobic digester in connection with the dump. And we passed measure something or other to approve whatever, and my understanding is that an RFP is out and bids have been submitted. This issue has never come before the Utilities Advisory Commission to the best of my knowledge, and I understand it is not primarily a utilities issue. There are other factors. On the other hand, it is my understanding that this facility would or could or might produce RPS-eligible electricity that could be sold by CPAU, and a substantial amount. I've heard it could measure into the thousands of homes. So, to the extent there are proposals on the table that would do that versus proposals on the table that would not do that, I would think the UAC might want to weigh in on that. Director Fong, thoughts?
We did bring a policy to the UAC for the pricing of that, of any renewable energy that would be produced by a project like that. So this did come, that aspect, which is sort of the utilities aspect of that project, did come to the UAC and was ultimately adopted by the council.
Is there an opportunity for the UAC to weigh in with the city council to recommend to the city council that if faced with choices that do produce renewable RPS eligible electricity versus those that don't, that we would perhaps favor those that do?
Actually, this is a topic that I think we do plan to bring forward. I think that's on your 12-month rolling calendar in February.
Fabulous.
The discontinuing the plug-in program and expanding the clean program. And so that could be, right now the clean program is entirely for solar projects, and we're thinking of expanding it to other projects like the anaerobic digester, that they would essentially use that type of a power purchase agreement, and then we'd have to establish a different price than solar.
So I support that, but just on the, I'll hold off for a sec. So just on the very narrow point though, if the city is considering hiring some company to build some facility, and some would produce renewable electricity and some would not, or RPS eligible electricity, I would love to see the UAC weigh in on that very specific issue. How should we?
I'm told that on February 10th by Senior Resource Planner Shiva Swami Nathan, that there will be a council study session on the anaerobic digester, and you can certainly speak there.
Okay, I will dig into this issue a little.
You should double check the agendas. They do change, but for now, I guess it's tentatively scheduled for February 10th.
Sounds good.
So I'll just comment on what I recall about this, which was when we discussed it before. This is not a utilities project, and the anaerobic digester will produce at first gas, which may be used as gas at the recycling plant, or it may be converted into electricity. And as I recall the city's policy right now, that electricity will be made available for sale to Palo Alto Utility or any other utility company that wishes to bid for it.
So in other words, John, it's your understanding that whatever bid is accepted, however it's done, it will produce renewable gas or electricity, and so which project is chosen is sort of, from a utility point of view or an energy point of view, irrelevant, because they'll all be the same. Okay?
And I don't mean to cut the discussion short, but also if we want to discuss the digester a little bit further, it might be good to agendize it for a later meeting or.
Okay, that's an interesting idea.
Right.
Director
forum,
Funk
whether it be
enthusiastically
the
endorses by her.
study session or.
I think the question, though, is if we're talking about design choices and procurement, does that fall within the scope of the UAC?
No, of course not.
And I think that doesn't, right? I think there are other city departments that worry about that.
But it goes back to the point that Commissioner Melton just said, and my point is, if there's a fundamental policy issue about whether we're going for a project that does produce renewable gas and or electricity versus doesn't, that is something I would think the UAC could weigh in on.
Fine, but I had thought your concern had to do with the design of such a plant and the vendor chosen to build it and such things.
No, not at all. Just whether,
okay.
I would think
misunderstood.
Sorry if I wasn't clear. I would think the UAC might be interested in weighing in on whether the city should choose a plan, project, vendor, whatever, that produces renewable gas and electricity versus one that doesn't. That's it. I couldn't care less which vendor, project, color scheme, or anything else. That's enough for me on this now. I'll take this one offline. I'll add it to my list of things to take offline. Okay, anyone else have anything else to say under commissioner comments? If not,
I have
this...
a quick question, actually,
go for it.
For Director Fong. I've noticed on the items of to be scheduled on the calendar includes the cabin trade compliance for the gas utility, and I know it's 2015 when it comes under the cabin trade system. Do you have a sense when that discussion might be scheduled? Because I would assume there's a bunch of regulatory process that's happening at the ARB right now that, or is about to happen.
You know, they did, I thought they issued their proposed rules, so I don't imagine, I imagine we should be able, I'm going to take a wild guess, we should be able to come back in early next year. So we definitely will be back. I won't be, well, last time, boy, that was at the end of the year. In the following year, they were going to implement. But I think they're trying to leave enough time so that all the few gas utilities in the state can actually get their acts together and know what to do with the allowances. So we'll come as soon as we can. And if we have enough that's preliminary, we can even bring that forward to you early and then come back with a final. But anyway, Debbie Lloyd would have been great to tell us exactly where we are in the process, or Carla, both of whom were here earlier tonight. Sorry about this. They are the two active folks who are helping with that.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, with that, our next scheduled meeting is January 8th. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. Meeting's adjourned.